And so we're live, and I'll cue you up so that you get a bit of what the Transforming Guyana aims to do.
The Guyana Business Journal and the Caribbean Policy Consortium presents Transforming Guyana. In each episode, Dr. Blackman and Dr. Lewis will tackle a different area of interest for transforming Guyana.
Well, good morning, colleagues, and welcome to Transforming Guyana, Season 2, Episode 6, on workforce development in the emerging Guyanese oil and gas economy. I am your host, as usual, Terrence Blackman, Chair and Associate Professor of Mathematics at Medgar Evers College in the City University of New York, and the founder of the Guyana Business Journal. As is always the case, it's important to kind of stress for a moment the sort of vision of the Guyana Business Journal. Our vision is to provide innovative and practical recommendations that advance the goal of securing an open, safe, prosperous, and cohesive Guyana, in which all Guyanese, irrespective of race, class, ethnicity, and religious persuasion, share equitably in the economic prosperity of Guyana. And to this end, this webinar series, Transforming Guyana, brings together experts and prominent voices from Guyana, the Caribbean, and the diaspora, and around the world to discuss the impacts of Guyana's oil and gas development. We aim to offer a nuanced look at Guyana's opportunities and potential pitfalls, and to explore strategies to maximize the positive impacts that the oil revenues can have on Guyana's people and future, while mitigating the risks that other countries have faced. And since we come to you from the diaspora, we're always thinking about identifying those roles that the diaspora can play in this transition. Today, we brought together panelists from across all of the continents to discuss this issue of workforce development. Let me introduce them to you properly, because I think this is extremely important. Karen Abrams is a renowned STEM education advocate who empowers young people in Guyana and other vulnerable communities. Her core expertise lies in business and education. Karen's passion for STEM education has led her to spearhead the STEM Guyana initiative, where she's helped to train STEM club leaders, develop mobile apps, support children's learning, and she has been the intellectual and spiritual force behind several of Guyana's youth teams' participation in the global robotics challenges. Her contributions to the field have been recognized by the Inter-American Development Bank. Tullow Oil most recently invested a combined $1 million in STEM Guyana's learning pods to support vulnerable children's access to STEM education. Karen is committed to expanding the reach of STEM education beyond Guyana and into other vulnerable communities worldwide. She holds a bachelor's degree in management from Howard University, yay, go Bison, an MBA degree in marketing from San Francisco State, and she's currently a student in the doctoral program in education technology at the University of Florida, where she is continuing to explore innovative ways to empower young people and promote social change. Karen also brings to the space more than a decade-long career in corporate America, where she ended her career as a director of operations at one of America's largest internet companies. Dr. Andre Brandley, coming to us from Switzerland, is a professor of molecular pathophysiology at the Faculty of Medicine in Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, Germany, where he teaches physiology and conducts biomedical research in the areas of organogenesis, i.e., rare hereditary diseases, and drug discoveries. He was born in Basel, Switzerland in 1962 to a Guyanese mother and Swiss father, and holds dual nationalities. He did his undergraduate studies in biochemistry and molecular biology at the University of Basel, and subsequently completed graduate studies at the European Molecular Biology Lab in Heidelberg in Germany, and graduated with a PhD from the University of Basel in 1989. He's worked at the University of California, San Francisco, and did postdoc at Harvard. And he's recently returned to Switzerland, where he serves as a principal investigator for therapeutic technologies at the Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences of ETH Zurich. So he's won the Pfizer Research Prize, and he regularly travels to Guyana and is an avid observer of current affairs in Guyana. He has penned numerous letters in the Guyanese press, regularly commented on Kaichor Radio's Guyana's Oil and You and Oil Talk with the UGG Guyana shows. Since 2022, he serves as a director of the board of the Oil and Gas Governance Network, OGGN, a non-profit, non-governmental organization informing and educating Guyanese on all aspects of oil exploration and production. And our final guest, coming to us from Kampala in Uganda, Laurent Stéphane, graduated from the French Institute of Petroleum, and he started his career with Total. From 1990 to 2006, he's occupied different technical positions in surveying, geophysics, geohazard identification, pipeline projects, and operations. He's led investigations of Arctic conditions and took part in expeditions in the Barents Sea and the North Pole. Since 2007, he has been engaged in several key management positions in international recruitment, training, and competencies development for Total subsidiaries. From 2015 to 2019, he reshaped and led the Tabak, this is the oil field in Abu Dhabi, and the ADNOC academies in the UAE. And from 2019 to 2021, he implemented the national training program for the Mozambique LNG 20 billion investment project in Mozambique, a country with no oil and gas history. He's currently in charge of East Africa recruiting and training and management in Uganda and Tanzania, two countries that are new to the oil and gas experience. And he's currently referent expert in Total Energies for implementing large training and competencies development programs. So let me say welcome to all of you. It is an absolute pleasure for me to be here, and I want to invite our partner in this endeavor, David Lewis from the Caribbean Policy Consortium, to bring a word of welcome from the CPC. David?
Thank you, Terence. Good morning to all. Good afternoon if you're on the other side of the pond, as we say. Andre, Karen, Laurent, thank you for joining us today. I'd just like to give a few quick points on our topic today, workforce development, based on previous discussions we've had, which actually stimulated the idea to have an entire session just on skills development, workforce development in Guyana, and also how this has developed in other markets in the world, both related to oil and gas economies, but also non-oil and gas economies. I think first and foremost, we need to separate the issue of labor supply and demand in a country like Guyana versus skills supply and demand. Sometimes that gets caught up in a political debate, which is sometimes conflictive and toxic because it is not the case that Guyana has labor shortage. As a matter of fact, we have still, even with this boom in oil and gas economy, unemployment rates. The challenge in Guyana more immediately is specific skills shortages in different areas. And then as we move on with the massive economic growth both in the oil and gas sector, but beyond, then uh, quantitative labor needs in various different areas. Secondly, the opportunity and challenge with regards to global best practices and expertise at the human resource development level and skills training with these new global FDI partners, which are companies like Exxon, and now we have Chevron. So we have basically the two major global players in the fossil fuel industry with a presence in Guyana and what that means in terms of their expertise, best practice in terms of human resource development, and as has been mentioned in Terence's forward, the whole question of challenges and opportunities for using these experiences for skills development in Guyana. Thirdly, is the linkage with tertiary institutions of training and education. And I emphasize the training because, particularly in the Caribbean, we have had a history of overemphasizing the traditional university degree educational system and not so much what we're seeing today in the 21st century technology driven economy of training in specific skill sets of doing things. And the importance of being able to use this expertise and this presence, not only of oil companies as foreign direct investors, but many others that are entering the Guyana market. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a delegation of Mexican business people setting up shop in different areas in Guyana, not in the oil and gas area, but obviously related to the growth in oil and gas, and what that means for the institutions in Guyana, not just the University of Guyana, but many of the other institutions of tertiary and higher education, which are involved in this and the challenge for them. Very recently, many of you have heard of the boom in the microprocessing market here in the United States and initiatives by the US to do collaboration with markets in the Americas as part of a nearshoring strategy to be closer to home market. And one of the great stories of that is Arizona State University, which about 15 years ago started programs in microprocessing engineering and today is the number one institution in the United States providing trained expertise for that market and in growth in that market. Some 30 years ago, I was privy to the move of Intel into a small economy, Costa Rica, in 1996, in which the determinant factor for Intel in moving into Costa Rica was working with the Universidad de Costa Rica and its engineering curriculum to be able to prepare the training of those engineers so that day one graduation, they were ready to work at the Intel plant in Costa Rica, as opposed to what Intel shared with the president of Costa Rica back then. It takes us 9 to 18 months to train graduated engineers for the task we need at the Intel plant. So obviously there was disconnect there. So there's opportunities like that which should be looked at and developed in the Guyana case, both with UG and other institutions, to make sure that the training and the skills that are being provided at these institutions link to the real supply demand needs in the marketplace. And finally, there is the challenge and opportunity of developing and growing homegrown talent, the nationals of Guyana, men and women who will be filling many of these positions, and then the need, which is also a challenge and an opportunity, of importing talent in different areas. And that is something that needs to be looked at sector by sector, segment by segment, in order to do it in a very balanced manner. Let me just close off. We had shared with various of you the Guyana Graphic, GuyanaGraphic.com, just yesterday had a commentary piece by Ian Hall on navigating migration, labor, and geopolitical complexities for Guyana. And we recommend it to everybody because Ian just actually hit the nail on the head in terms of what are the different political, economic, and social challenges and opportunities for a small economy like Guyana with this massive growth that is taking place. So, Terence, let me leave it at that and use that as introduction. And thank you again to our panelists today. We look forward to a good discussion and welcome you all on board with the GBJ CPC webinars.
Well, thank you, David. And I think you just sort of hit the nail on the head. In a sense, Guyana today finds herself at a really, critical juncture, right? So, poised on the brink of this irreversible economic transformation. Just as you pointed out a moment, Guyana's oil and gas industry grew by 98.4% in the first half of 2023. The overall economy saw an expansion of about 59.5, almost 60% during the same period, right? I think for us, it's clear, economic growth rates of 98% is exceedingly high and rare. And they're really only associated with these sorts of unique circumstances that we're experiencing. I often contextualize for people, by the end of June 2023, this year, Guyana has recorded a total crude oil production of about 68.7 million barrels. This is compared with about 34 million barrels in the same time period last year. And production is expected to reach about 1.3 million barrels per day by 2027. The Guyanese GDP per capita has tripled in the last tripled. That means it's grown, it's 3 times its size, it potentially making it the richest country in South America based on that measure. And so, a key challenge here will be the impact of Guyana's labor market and the skills gaps that you've just described. And the work of Arnold McIntyre makes very clear some of the challenges that are faced in this context. And so we wanted to have a small contribution to this conversation that would facilitate kind of a bit of thinking around this. And to set this up, I wanted Andre to participate in this program because being someone who's coming to us from Switzerland is one of those places where when one visits, one understands kind of very strongly the importance of a technically skilled populace and a technically skilled populace that is able to sustainably manage a society. And it provides for us a kind of model, not something that we should imitate slavishly, but a model nonetheless whose key components we should take seriously. And I wanted to invite Andre to tell us a bit about the importance of education and training programs, and in a sense to present us with a broadly speaking successful workforce development from some other country that can provide some guidance for our colleagues in Guyana. So, Dr. Brandley, welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Terence and David, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to present how education works in Switzerland. And I think there's some useful messages, not only just to Guyana, but to many low and middle income countries, that are focusing, in my opinion, far too much on, that's not my first slide, this one exactly, that are focusing far too much on the university track and neglecting the vocational and professional tracks, which are absolutely important. I also would like to mention that the point that David made in his brief remarks, matching your labor force with the demand of the labor market is absolutely essential. And I think Switzerland and other Northern European countries have come up with a system which developed, of course, over centuries, but can be implemented. And Guyana has actually the core of it already available. I think it just needs a few adjustments. And I hope to outline these in the next few slides that I have prepared for this purpose. So first the first slide is now shown here, hallmarks of the Swiss dual track education system. You see it's called dual track because we have here two systems that are intertwined. We have the classical academic track that most people are aware of and a vocational professional track. The concept is that nobody is left behind. You have also options for weaker students and also even for adults who had failed to get some vocational professional training. So the system allows to integrate also adult people who have previously not been able to participate in the labor market. And this is particularly important in Guyana, where we have, as David pointed out, there's labor there, but there are people that do not have sufficient education. So they need to be helped to find a place in the rapidly developing economy on the basis of oil and gas. There are various crossover possibilities. So if you're in the vocational track, it doesn't mean that you can get an academic, that you're excluded from academic training. This is not the case. Then a very important thing is this professional vocational track training is done in a public-private partnership. It doesn't occur in the void where the public just sets up vocational schools. These are done together with companies. There are state-financed vocational schools. I'll just point out how this actually works. So the state pays for the schools. Students or apprentices attend these schools 2 days a week. They get the theoretical background to the trade they are learning. The faculty is primarily recruited from companies, from industry. They teach part-time there. They are paid by the state for doing this, but these are people that are practitioners. They are sitting in the companies. They know what they're talking about. Then you have practical on-job training. 3 days a week, these students are embedded in a company that sponsors them for 3 to 4 years, depending on the educational program. So these companies are hosting and supervising these students with qualified staff to train them, for example, to become electricians, to become plumbers, to become oil industry experts, to become welders, etc. The company is paying a monthly wage to each apprentice. So an apprentice gets a salary. It's not huge, but for teenagers, it's sufficient money that it's attractive. And there is no requirement for the host company to hire you once you've graduated. But if you're an apprentice, they want to keep you. So you have a job. You get already an entry job into a company. So these are some of the hallmarks. Could you move to the next slide? Or can I do it myself? Oh yeah, I can do this myself. Okay. So this slide is just to outline how the system works. The bottom half you have in Guyana too. You might have kindergarten, then you have primary school. Then you have the secondary school. 9 years of school are mandatory in Switzerland. I guess in Guyana it's similar. If students cannot decide which of these upper tracks they want to enter, they can enter a 10th year, but that's not paid by the state, so that you have to finance that yourself. And then you have several choices. Broadly speaking, you have the academic track right to the left. So you go to college prep high school, you graduate with a baccalaureate. This allows you to enter university and the Federal Institutes of Technology into bachelor, master's, and even PhD programs. Now, you have the alternative is to do an apprenticeship, as outlined before, together with vocational school. These programs are between 3 to 4 years. You can afterwards then qualify to get into the universities of applied sciences, to a college of higher education, or in some cases also to the teacher college. And there is permeability, so you can get a degree at the University of Applied Sciences, and you can then enter university into master programs. So even if you start out with this vocational school program, you can get into an academic program if that's your interest. So this just illustrates a little bit the possibilities. Then what you have here is federal vocational certificate. This is here for weaker students that might have a hard time in an apprenticeship and vocational school program. They can get a federal certificate where they get basic training for 2 years in a certain skill, for example, being a nurse help or being an agricultural help, but they have a qualification. If they do well, they can transition into a regular apprenticeship program and can go all the way up again in the program. So what are the strengths of the Swiss educational system? There's career prospects due to formalized education programs. There's a dual track approach to learning. The dual track is primarily seen in the apprenticeship vocational schools. There's permeability, so you can move from one of these tracks to the other without being hindered or blocked. It's a labor market focus, since these vocational schools are done in a private-public partnership. And there's a collective governance, which means that these schools are run, they're not top-down by the government, they're done in participation with the federal government, the local government, and the professional associations, which form here the curriculums that are taught. So let's go to the next slide. So some statistics. Oops. Why is this jumping back? Good. I need slide number 3. So, okay, some statistics. So there are 245 different occupations to choose from, 55 academic programs. The 25% of the teenagers get into the academic track. 75% of the teenagers go into the vocational track. So you see, it's very different to many other countries. We have far more people that are getting professional training than academic training. Of these 75%, about 15% move on later to enter the academic track after they did their professional training. So we end up with a ratio of 30 to 40% of the students that will graduate from universities. Similar systems are also in Germany, Austria, Netherlands, Scandinavia, and in some Eastern European countries. The system of this dual education system, where you involve the companies also in the education, not later on, but in the education, this dual private-public partnership is commonly not seen in Southern European and Anglo-Saxon countries. And what is also important, teachers and educators are at every level are well paid. They belong to the middle class in Switzerland. So you find professionally well paid people that won't run away for other jobs because they can make a living being a skilled and good teacher. So what's the impact? We can see here youth and unemployment levels are very low in these countries here. You can see Germany, Lithuania, and so on. We have youth unemployment levels that are extremely low. And while they are higher in Southern European countries, you see Spain, 26% of the youth is unemployed because they don't have really well-established vocational training programs. So what's the advantage of this system here? It ensures highly qualified specialists for the labor market, something that David already alluded for, that the labor market wants to have. There's a pathway to education also for children of less affluent parents because they can enter the vocational training programs. They get a salary, they can support their families and get an education, and they can enter also then the academic track, as I made clear, so they can move up the career ladder. The public-private partnership trains people that business and industry really needs, because these companies won't get involved in these training programs if you don't train the people that they want to see on the labor market. In addition, if you have a skilled labor force, it matches the labor market, something that David pointed out, and it attracts foreign companies that come to your country because they can find the labor force they need for their business. So Switzerland has a high number of foreign companies operating in Switzerland, having their European or Middle Eastern subsidiaries set up in Switzerland. Youth unemployment is exceedingly low in Switzerland. Also in Germany, 2.2% currently. These are the most recent numbers. Overall unemployment at 2.5% in Switzerland. Teenagers earn an income which reduces youth crime, a problem that we have in Guyana. Structured daily programs prepares these people for professional work life, and it reduces the oversupply of academics that we see in many developing countries and the lack of craftspeople by having this vocational training program as outlined here before. So let me move to the next slide. This is just a summary here of the system. So it's a dual track approach to learning. There's permeability, a principle of tailoring training together with the companies. It's labor market focused. It's collective governance. So it's not only just the government that sets this up, it does this in close collaboration with the professional organizations. There's quality, innovation, and efficiency is inherent in the system because companies don't want to train people that are of bad efficiency. Since you're in the company, you get to learn a lot of innovative technologies, which you would not have with standalone vocational schools. There's openness to diversity, and there are attractive career prospects for graduates. So the summary is down here. Swiss education system offers a broad, varied, and flexible range of educational opportunities. Now, I would just like to close here with some recommendations for Guyana. 10 recommendations that I would like to put here, and I'm sure Karen can comment on this or incorporate some of these in her remarks that she will have in a moment. So introduce a public-private vocational education system. That's probably the top priority. Don't have this just as standalone vocational schools that are where you don't have industry and businesses intertwined and responsible for this system. Establish vocational schools where the jobs are. Setting up a vocational school in Berbice for the oil industry where there's no oil industry makes no sense because it takes 2 hours by car to travel from Georgetown to Berbice. And if you have part-time teachers from the oil industry, they will not end up in Berbice. So this is a criticism from my side. Invest heavily into your teaching staff and infrastructure. UG Guyana needs a major overhaul to build modern teaching labs, for example. Offer attractive salaries that you can keep the teaching staff in the country and you can recruit people from abroad. For example, CARICOM nations. Yeah, and we have a lot of well-educated Guyanese abroad. Provide scholarships that teaching staff can go abroad, can learn about systems in Germany, Switzerland. Enforce performance requirements. So you don't pay people well, but they don't perform bad. And this applies to students and to teachers. System of collective governance involving all stakeholders, as I pointed out. Bottom up is better than top down. Bottom up, I mean, involve the companies and the businesses in shaping these skills that you want and these programs that you want to establish in your country. And last and most important point, besides the first point, is be realistic. What is possible for a nation of 800,000 people? And reinvent the US. Switzerland has tenfold more people, but you can tailor this to Guyana's potential and Guyana's resources. So I would like to close here. I didn't talk too long, but
no, I think you queued it up perfectly for Laurent. The point is, be realistic about what is possible for a nation of 800,000 people, and to think about how this actually could get done. And in this sense, I think we're fortunate today to have Laurent Stéphane someone who has actually done this and who is actually doing this in some country, not Guyana, but some place that we can draw an example from. Laurent, I want to invite you to share with us some of your thoughts from Kampala, Uganda, and lessons for Guyana in this context.
Okay, thank you, Terence. The first statement I would like to make is that we are in a changing world in the oil and gas industry. Today, we can see more and more new countries to oil and gas, and all these countries are facing the same challenges. In the past, we were more or less always operating in the same countries, Angola, Uganda in Africa, Middle East, United States, you name it. Today, there are more and more new players. I'm dealing with Uganda and Tanzania. You have Papua New Guinea, you have Mozambique, you have Suriname, you have Guyana. You have plenty of new countries facing the same challenge, which is no or very limited oil and gas competencies available. And it's very difficult because not only you don't have the people, but you don't have the plants to train the people. Quite often, you are in countries where the plant is not yet constructed. So it's a double challenge. And in the meantime, you face huge expectations from the authorities and the people. So these people are looking for prosperity, and most of the people think there will be a miracle linked to oil and gas. And miracle doesn't really exist. There is always a price to pay, I would say, and you have to bounce back on what Dr. Andre was saying. You have to be realistic. Okay. So we are in a changing world, and in the meantime, we are in a changing industry. The skills have evolved. The plans of today are not the plans of yesterday. It calls for more and more competencies and technicity. We have a triptych in the oil and gas industry that is people, plant, procedure. We have more technological equipment, more complex procedures, and that calls for more competencies. And I don't want to mitigate what Dr. Andre said, but today we have to be realistic also. The vocational education in Switzerland and in Germany most probably is not at the same level as the vocational education in many new oil and gas countries. At least I don't know Guyana in details, but if I compare with Uganda, Mozambique, Tanzania, it's very different. So today, for the operation and technicians, people, the usual vocational training education is no longer sufficient. We need to look at a higher level, otherwise the gap is too large between the training they have to follow and the underpinning knowledge of the people. Another strong statement today, and it's a common mistake in these new countries, people are mismatching constructions and operations. So construction is the construction of the plants, the construction of the facilities, the development of all what is necessary to produce the oil. And the operations is what is linked. Basically, once the house is built, how are you going to live in the house? So the number of people that you need to run the plant. And there are huge differences. So the first difference is the number of people involved. We are talking of thousands of people for the construction, whereas we are talking about hundreds of people for operation. On a typical project, I would say you will have 10,000 people involved in the construction, and you will have 300, 400 people involved in the operations. The other big difference is that for construction, you mainly need semi-skilled people, typically the people from vocational education, and the top of these people can be considered as skilled people. But for the construction, you don't need to have a lot of engineers because since it's a short term, you are going to take these people from abroad and import it. But it's a short duration. Basically, for the construction, it's a limited number of high-level people from the country that will be involved, but a huge number of semi-skilled people. The construction lasts for 2-4 years. The operations will last for decades, usually a minimum of 20-25 years. So these are the main differences. So the people you're looking for are not the same. The underpinning knowledge of the people are not the same, and the training you're going to deliver is not the same. Countries, nevertheless, have very high expectations on employment. And you need to learn how to deal with the frustration and the need for anticipation and common work with authorities is tremendous. So authorities, you have a lot of politicians. And politicians, they want to sell something. So they are going to sell the jobs from the construction, not just the jobs from the operations, which means that they are creating even more expectation. So you're going to train people during the construction phase. They will learn to be on time, to follow rules and procedures. They will have an health, safety, and environment training, which is very important. But most of them won't work during the operation because it's not the same skills first, and it's not the same number. Even if they had the skill, you have a ratio of 1-20, so you're not going to employ all of them. So you need to work in advance so that these people that have been trained for the construction, the country is able to use them afterwards for other industries, for the development of the country. And for that, the country needs a plan. And having a plan, sorry to say that, but whatever the country, is not the usual strength of the politicians, okay? They are more in the instantaneous things. So you need to work hard before to tell to the authorities, in 4 years, I will have that number of very good people. What do we do with them? Because they are not all going to be employed in the oil and gas industry, but they have competencies. What's the plan for the industrial development of the country? This is the true questions. So an important point also to be acceptable, because around all of it, there is a huge challenge of acceptability of the oil and gas industry. You're going to create a lot of expectations, so you're going to create a lot of frustration. So how to be acceptable? A very important point is the recruitment of the people. How are you going to manage the recruitment of the people? By recruiting the right people without creating too much frustration. So we don't have time really today. Within Total, I have developed a typical tool that is a MOOC-based recruitment. A MOOC is a massive online open course. So basically, people attend on 9 weeks different modules where there is math and science, oil and gas discovery, HSE, get to know about Total Energies, get to know about the operations, get to know about the lifestyle, because not everyone is ready to work on a rotational style, not everyone is ready to work on shift, and so on. Once they have discovered it, so first, the people that are not fit for that, whatever the reason, they don't go up to the end of the training. And on the other one, it's a very fair way. You give your parameters for the recruitment that are the best among the best, but also you can say that you're going to introduce some bias, I would say, linked to gender diversity, which is very important today to be acceptable, geographical diversity to favor the people that are living in the area of operation, and so on. So it's one of the tools. I like this one because I built it, but there are plenty of tools that can be used. But if you think you are going to put an advert and ask an agency to do the filtering on a fair way, it doesn't work, because they will receive thousands and thousands of resumes, because everyone wants to be part of that nice story. So then comes the training. The easy way is to say, okay, I take the people and I send them abroad. There are plenty of competent schools with good instructors, good equipment abroad. It's not the way to do it, at least not 100%. You need to develop partnerships in country with local institutions so that they are able to be part of the development of the people, so that you do a competency transfer with these institutes, and these institutes will be able in the future to train their own people. You will have to train a large number of people to start, but then you will have natural attrition, but also attrition can be people leaving, but can be also people promoted. So at the end, you need new people. So you need to develop a sustainable training system in country where you are autonomous at the end for training the new people. Usually there is a very weak link between the industry and the education. There is a lack of relevant equipment and experienced instructors. Equipment costs a lot, so it's an investment. Having right instructors, as Andre said, you need to bring them from abroad. But what is very important, if you bring instructors from abroad, is that you ensure a transfer of competency between these experienced instructors with an oil and gas experience and the people from the site. Develop also in-country training with partnership with universities. The training must be in classroom, it must be in workshops, but it must be at the site also. And then you can also benefit the local training centers by bringing the instructors from Guyana to the field so that they see the real life. You can't imagine in a normal world an instructor training people around oil and gas if himself he never saw oil and gas in the field before. So you need to create that partnership. And it has to be written on the paper from day one. Otherwise, the oil and gas companies, they will say, it's not written, it's complicated, HSE, blah, blah, blah. So you need to insist on that. It's the knowledge transfer, either through the equipment, either to the competencies of the people. Mm-hmm. I will conclude with the last point. That is, unfortunately, human nature is human nature. You will train people. These people are going to become very competent. And you will pay them according to a benchmark, most probably, that is the benchmark of the salaries in Guyana. And these people, in fact, once they are very competent, they are not in competition with people from Guyana. They are in competition with the global oil and gas industry. So if you're not able to provide them not only with the right salary, but also with the right possibility to grow in the company, to jump the ladder, to be able to progress, these people, what they will do, they will put a very good resume on LinkedIn, they will be poached, and they will leave Guyana. And they love the country, most probably, but they love the money even more. And they will come back to Guyana for vacation, of course. But this is not what you expect. And also that has to be think in advance, because all oil and gas companies are benchmarking salary on the local market. And in oil and gas industry, for such countries, it doesn't work. Otherwise, you will see a lot of evaporation of your competencies. So training people, yes, but make sure that the amount of money you have invested, at the end, you have a return of investment by these people staying in the country and developing others. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. You've given us much food for thought, but I have to say I'm quite happy that Karen Abrams is speaking after you in this context, because I think as you have kind of articulated, we need to stay reality based, and there are not many miracles. I think Karen might be the miracle in this context and the work that she's doing. But I think as I listen to you talk about sort of, an institutional industrial development plan, thinking about people, plans, procedures, thinking about how to do this sustainably, I think it's clear to me that one of the models that has emerged in Guyana about how we begin to do human capital development in a sustainable manner, in a manner that might lead to folks not just taking the money and going to wherever they want to go in the world, is what has emerged in STEM Guyana. You say miracle, as I noted in our introduction. Karen introduced robotics participation in the global robotics teams, and Surprise, surprise, a mini miracle, or team from Guyana performed at the very highest level in this global competition. So the thing is, I think we have kids who have the talent, and what, in a sense, we need is the plan. And what I want to have Karen do is talk about some of the work that she's been doing, and then we can all come back together and have some further discussion in this regards. Karen Abrams, the floor is
Thank
yours.
you. Thanks. Terrence, can you share my presentation?
Yes, I've just added it to the.
Okay, great. So I'm going to do the drill down on Guyana, and I was afraid that some of the other guests would duplicate some of the information I have, but that's not the case. So just for the first part, I'm going to reinforce the concepts, because I know all of you already know a lot about what's going on in Guyana, but I think some of the people listening need to be aware of some of the points we're going to highlight here. So essentially, the skills gap that everyone has spoken about is really kind of unique in the Ghana context as well. Between 1965 and 2000, 90% of Guyana's nationals with a tertiary education left the country. We are in a situation where 80% of our university graduates leave. The employment to population ratio for women is 30.9% compared with 54% for men. So there's some potential low-hanging fruit there, getting more women involved. But the complications continue. Ghana is already a really tiny labor force, and it's just not big enough to serve the expected growth of the economy. So essentially, hypothetically, if all of our unemployed, underemployed, discouraged workers were upskilled and prepared, we still wouldn't have enough people to maintain the growth that is projected in the oil and gas industry even. When I look at the landscape, I tend to look at all of the industries, not just the oil and gas, because our young people are in every region of this country. And we want to make sure we help to prepare them for any eventuality. We don't know how artificial intelligence, for example, is going to affect several of the high-paying jobs and high-paying industries, but we want to be able to prepare them for an AI eventuality that could impact some of the roles that they are thinking about. So here today, the oil and gas industry, as a narrow percent of total employment, is about 0.7%. The expanded percentage is about 3.7, let's say 4%. So when I look at the entire landscape, I'm looking at preparing our young people, or building a model that could help prepare our young people for industries across the board. But I'll dive in a little bit with the oil and gas today. So the most in-demand jobs, that was a notification we had from the ILO, their last report, I believe it was in 2021, and it talked about the jobs that were most in demand: engineering, environmental and occupational, health and safety, etc. They're all listed here. But the key thing about this is that 60% of these, the most in-demand jobs, are considered rare in Guyana. And 81% of them demand some sort of higher technical or higher undergraduate training. Now, the key here, if 81% of those most in-demand jobs in the oil and gas industry require this sort of training, then it runs right up against this. This is the Guyana Labor Force Survey. And 2021, I haven't seen the updated version, but I don't think it'll change that much. You have 50% of the population with a primary or less education. That's problematic in a country where you already have a very tiny labor force. Your most in-demand jobs require technical training or college degree, and the workforce just is not matched up. Is not matched up to fulfill the demands. So education and the skills gap. Some of the issues I identified in researching the space: we've got a significant dropout rate, or I call them early school leavers, you call them whatever. 14,000 of our young people approximately take the 6th grade exam. Public school young people take the 6th grade exam, and around 6,000 of the public school kids take the 5th form exam, the CSEC. We call it 5th form. They call it, I think, 11th grade. So there's when we're looking at this problem space, we have to dive down and figure out how do we fill that gap? What's happening there? Curriculum relevance is another thing. Our traditional educational system has not been preparing our young people for the technical problem solving, critical thinking kind of space. And to the ministry's credit, they've identified that. And I know that they're making changes in the curriculum there. One of our other guests have shared about preparing teachers, making sure teachers' teachers are well paid. The skills gap can also be attributed to the readiness of primary school teachers to instruct in STEM subjects. We have to be able to pay the salaries that would attract high quality teachers who will be able to help to convey and to teach our young people and to give them a love for subjects like math and science. Access to resource. Students in primary schools may face challenges accessing modern facilities, up-to-date textbooks, etc. I know that the ministry is also doing a lot of work here. So I will not, this is not an indictment of the ministry by any means. This is just highlighting some of the issues. I know they're building out a lot of spaces. I know they've invested in textbooks. I see labs coming up in schools. So these are things I know they have identified themselves. So before I get into STEM Guyana, I summarize kind of where we are and some of the things, and I think I match up a little bit with Andre on the solution side, but some of the things some of these are unique to Guyana, and some of these are not. We have the early school leaver problem. We have a general immigration problem. We have the UG, college educated students, immigration problem. We have the curriculum issue. Now, I think of this in terms of a pipeline. I think of my work in two ways. One is creating a pipeline into the STEM industry. And I also see my work as building a model. So continuing to refine this model so that we can sort of be an example, not only to the educational system here in Guyana, but in the Caribbean, in the region, around the world, right? So we're kind of trying to focus on building that model. But the pipeline, I think, is very important. If you don't capture the young people in primary school, if you don't engage their creativity and their imagination and their self-confidence in thinking that they can be a scientist or an engineer, then by the time they get to high school, it's too late for you to capture them. It's too late. If we're so small, we have to make sure that we're capturing our young people early and piping them into that pipeline and inspiring them and motivating them and preparing them and giving them the self-confidence to determine, to answer the question, in which industry would you like to contribute in Guyana? And that answer should be in one of the technical industries, right? The other factor, and you mentioned it initially as you opened up, how do we make sure that opportunity is equally dispersed across the board? We have an issue with discrimination in Guyana. We have a gender issue. We have a racial issue. And we are so small, we should not have a situation where talented people are blackballed or can't find a job or can't be allowed to advance or can't find funding or can't get a contract or can't do a partnership. That is just unacceptable. Not only because it doesn't make sense, but also because we have so little talent and we have to expand the pie. We have to engage all the folks who are available. And these are people who can create opportunity and try to and sort of contribute to exponential growth. If I win on this government's watch, it's because of the government. The government wins. And I think we need to take that approach, that sort of view across the board. And then the wage situation, right? I would say uninspiring wages. We have to take another look at how we're paying people. If you're benchmarking oil and gas wages to the local market, Ghana's wages are absolutely low, have always been, are really low. And you have to consider that those young people have access to the internet. They have family abroad. We are the most connected probably to the diaspora. We know what an engineer doing a certain job in Guyana is paid overseas. That only lends itself to dissatisfaction. It doesn't make sense. There ought to be better thinking around how we benchmark salaries. So essentially on the solution side, comprehensive student retention strategy, we've got to look at that. Increase compensation, partner with STEM programs, increase teacher pay. A lot of these things I think were mentioned before, right? Project-based learning, robust immigration policy with controls. You look at UAE and where they started at 70,000 people and today they have 14 million or something like that. But those people aren't all citizens at the same level voting and impacting what's going on. They had to redesign their immigration policy. And so that's something that we have to look at as well. Establish career centers, encourage partnerships between universities, technical institutions, oil and gas companies, etc. So again, I'm repeating what was said, so I'll go quickly through this. All right. So the importance of early education. And here we have Ariel. Ariel started with us in one of our STEM clubs when she was 11. And today she's actually training to be an aeronautical engineer. She's not unique. We have another case. So essentially, we have some of our young people who are also working offshore as surveyors, underwater surveyors. So we are already making the connection. We know that young people coming through our pipeline will land, where they will land and how well they will do. So early, some of the skills that we teach our young people, this early critical thinking and problem solving and curiosity and exploration, real world relevance, building a strong foundation, again, back to the pipeline. These to me are making sure they're intellectually curious, that they ask questions. Whether AI takes over their job or not, they will land in the right place. We strengthen their math and science skills. By the time they come out of, by the time they get out of the, my computer is going to die. All right, I'll take 1 minute. Yeah. So by the time they come out of our pipeline, we want them to be young people who are thoughtful and who are confident and who know which careers they want to go to because they've been exposed to meeting people, mentors, and opportunities in the space. So here at STEM Guyana, we're 41 learning pods across all 10 regions of Guyana. We are 25 STEM clubs. And although our learning pods have been funded to the tune of $1 million, that time will run out soon and for the project, for the program. So what we're doing is we're building a STEM club program where we expect to have more than 100 STEM clubs across the country where we add enough value to where there's a revenue model associated with it. And so what we intend to do is transition our Learning Pods program right into the expanded STEM Club program where parents are convinced that we add enough value to where they're willing to help us to fund it and build a capacity to have the program stay in place. So that's one of the things we're doing. So what are our programs? Our programs include Learning Pods, STEM clubs. We have a parent academy. We have a STEM labs program. Programs designed specifically for primary school students include coding, robotics, soft skills development, artificial intelligence, aerospace education. All of these things we want to expose our young people to give them a sense of the possibilities, right? Early exposure, problem solving, hands-on learning, teamwork. We believe that those initiatives target skill development at an early age, and we are seeing the results. Again, our curriculum, drones, robotics. I want to drive a little bit down on the parent and community engagement piece, though, which is very critical because we can't build a pipeline without a connection to parents. And we did a survey and indicated that 63% of our parents were struggling with third grade math. So we decided to build a parent academy where we would expose our parents to the fundamentals of whatever topic their kids were covering in class. They would follow the lesson plans. And then they would, in 10 minutes, they would learn the concept well enough to help their kids with homework. And so today we have about 90 parents enrolled, but it's all, right now we're just testing. And we are meeting on Fridays and Saturdays with parents, but essentially they independently access our lesson plans database, which is about 1,300 lesson plans from grades 1 all the way to grades 10. And so we're trying to understand, how can we engage more parents? How could we prepare them? How can we make them ambassadors so they can help their own children? All of these things, all of our programs are designed to scale because we are a small team, we have a small budget, and we have a big mission. So mentorship programs, for example, U.S. Embassy just sponsored 2 programs. We have the marine biologist, and then we had, I forgot what the other role was. But essentially, we have a set of TV shows where we expose our young people to science and technology and careers and things like that. And so not only are we scaling education, scaling the technology, we're also scaling membership, scaling mentorship, scaling exposure to new things and new ideas. And what we can, if we can bring somebody in, we'll turn on a video and share it with them. There is absolutely no reason and no limit for our young people not to be prepared for the future. All right, so this is my last slide. And essentially, fundamentally, we want to foster a bright future. And we are intent on one of our positions is Guyana must specialize in intellectual heft. We have to specialize in brain talent. Right next door, there's Brazil. Whatever we can grow here, they'll grow it in massive amounts and at much lower cost. Whatever we develop here, they'll do it over there. We have to have, they should not be able to out-intellectualize us. Our young people should be the ones to say, I have this great idea that will change the region. I have this great idea that will change the world. And we want them to be self-confident enough to pursue that. Our citizens should be prepared for high-income jobs. I think there's room for immigrants, but I think that there's room for immigrants in the service industry and in highly specialized industries. The students, I think we should encourage the diaspora. I know the government is doing that. The students we prepared today must be skilled, confident, intellectually curious, problem solvers, focus on collaboration, excellent communicators, and they must be prepared for any eventuality. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's a good story, and it's a story that you should stick to. But what I want to do is I pull David in this context. David, you're a resident discussant. So in a sense, you've heard 3 stories. You've heard the kind of Swiss story in which there is a well-defined plan that has worked over many, many years, and it's sort of evolved over, really centuries. You've heard the work of Laurent talking about what happens in, how does one deal with this in a very concrete sense? How do we deal with this in terms of thinking precisely today about the construction, the operation, the people, the plan, the procedures? And then we've heard sort of Karen saying, well, maybe the plan ought to be that, Guyana should probably be a Silicon Valley of South America, where really, rather than focus on, sort of these small jobs where just 800,000, put everyone into a kind of high thinking, high fashioning mode and import the rest of folks from the rest of the Caribbean region, from the broader world. Put all of this into context for us. There are a few questions that have come in, which I'll pop up for them, but give us a kind of summing up of how you see this evolving. And as you do that, keep the thought in mind as we kind of look forward, kind of what sort of long-term strategies we want to have in place to sustain this workforce. We don't want to train folks, as Laurent has said, and then they travel to some other jurisdiction where they get paid more for this. So give us your thought, sort of trying to provide a synthesis of what we've heard thus far.
Thank you, Terence, and Karen, Laurent, and Andre. These were excellent, and I don't want to cop up much time, actually, Terence. I think we should let them give us some more feedback. But I've got two key takeaways. One, many of you have heard in our monthly programs, Guyana is work in progress. And it's work in progress of chewing gum, talking, walking, dancing, and doing the technology all at once. And those are big challenges in any environment. And in an environment where, we're not completely out of the woods from a country that was dominated by almost 5 decades of a notion of state-centered socialist development, contrary to, I would say, 95% of everything that our three speakers have spoken, and where when you discuss with people in Guyana, you read what's taken place, that DNA is still there in many areas. And that is a major obstacle. So you're just compounding many of the challenges that have to be dealt with at the public, private, civil society level. And the second point is the great opportunity, because Guyana has resources now that it can dedicate to ameliorating many of these challenges and moving forth with some of these opportunities. But as my mother used to say, it's good to have money. It helps you out. But gee, look at that poor Kennedy family. They have all that money, but that family is just damned. But yes, it's good to have money. I think we need to find that middle spot, that sweet spot, where the government is much more risk-taking, much more innovative in terms of investing in many of these areas that have been discussed, and that people also, like what Karen has done with STEM Guyana, take new initiatives with regards to this. The marketplace is very tough. It is very competitive. It does not care about failures, and it only rewards success. I think what Lauren was telling us with regards to the oil and gas industry is that if you fail, the market will just move on. So I think that's really important in terms of those strategies. And I think we need to start seeing some innovation in terms of where the Natural Resource Fund is investing, where monies from the royalties from the earnings of oil and gas are being invested, and not just support established institutions, but start thinking about what are the new institutions that Guyana needs in 2023, given this restriction. Finally, and last point, we haven't touched on it. It's sort of like the third rail in politics, but everything having to do with labor and immigration, that is an immediate need. No matter how fast resources are used, and no matter how quickly new innovative organizations are set up, Guyana needs new talent, skilled labor now. Otherwise, many of these projects would just fall flat because you can't afford it. And not every organization is going to be Exxon and Chevron that can bring in and take care of a couple of thousand of experts at the startup of a project and use that to launch. That's not the case for everybody. So that's a tough one that has to be faced. I know the government is discussing it. It is very politically sensitive and in some cases toxic, but it's the only way forward, just because at the end of the day, you're going to need bodies that will do a lot of this work.
Yeah, thank you, David. So a few questions have come in, and I'm glad to see Karen is back. So, so I'll first go to Karen and then Andre, since first you, Karen, and then Andre, because of the familiarity with Guyana. The question sort of Vernon Singroy asks is, how much of what from your sense of how much of what we're doing has been integrated? I mean, do you sense that there is a plan for a broader integration of some of these initiatives that lead to more rapidly developing the workforce over time?
I just from observing, I believe that the government has identified, they're well aware of the shortcomings and of the challenges, because I can see from the outside a focus on growing the technology, technical training, and things like that. My own personal experience with our programs, we are more connected to local governments, like the local regional education departments, and so a lot of our interactions and exchanges are with the regional education departments, and so if you think of, I guess they're part of government, but yeah, I mean, that's as much as I can share in terms of our integration. We are integrated with the regional bodies.
Yes. So do you want to chime in on that, Andre?
Yes, I mean, I think one has to look at what is theory and what is practice. And this is based on my readings, talking to people, and so on. The government has been announcing, I just think earlier this week, that they're setting up 6 more of these vocational training schools in different regions. Now, this sounds all good, but if these schools are just sort of schools that are sitting in a void and that are not tied together with local businesses, then this will just be money thrown down the drain. And what I mean, and I would like to illustrate this with the school that is being built in Berbice in Port Morant, if I recall correctly. Exxon is sponsoring part of this, but Exxon is not really involved in an educational vocational training program the way I've outlined it as it happens in Switzerland. And I think Laurent has pointed out that this is very important. You can't just train people without having the oil and gas industry, in his case, being involved and actually shaping these training programs that it fits their needs. What Laurent pointed out was, of course, the urgent need that you have to meet when you come into the country, and these programs take time to set up. So if you look back at the training center in Port Morant, just as one example, it's going to focus on tourism and on the oil industry. Now, why would you want to set this up 2 hours away from the Georgetown metropolitan area where you have all the jobs there? Tourism, the hotels, you have no hotels in Port Morant. So where do you get the people that will do the classes to train at the vocational school, the people about how do you take care of guests, the cooks that need to be trained and so on? You have to have these schools where there's the demand. Yeah. Now, if you want to set up something in Berbice, there's of course a demand for electricians, for carpenters, the agricultural industry. Why don't you set up, for example, there, again in a private-public partnership, schools where you train, for example, mechanics for tractors and stuff like that? So yeah. That's where I see the disconnect, and that's what happens if you have top-down decisions taken, mainly also on political basis, because, for example, the current government has its base in the Berbice, and they want to serve that base. But I'm just afraid we are wasting a lot of precious money by not talking to the local people. What do they really need there? And you won't get industry moving there just because there's a school. You have to tailor this to the needs in the local regions. So if you are in Latam, where you're far away from the oil and gas industry, there are other needs there in terms of local vocational training than you have in the Georgetown area. So this is just some of my comments.
No, I think you make a very important point, which is that we need to, perhaps this needs to be better aligned, and perhaps there, maybe there needs to be a larger group of people.
But this is easily achieved by tying in businesses. So I would tell Exxon, Chevron in future, you're not operating here if you're not training people locally. And if you don't,
my sense is that they are, at least as I've read, that they are. I would assume that they are part of the leadership of that process. So I would assume that they're not just simply engaged peripherally, but engaged substantively in terms of. I mean, that has always been my thinking, particularly. But I think you raise an important point in terms of if
they have to be stakeholders, they have to be forced to get enrolled in these training programs, because as Laurent pointed out, they really just want to get the job done. They don't have initially an incentive. Why should they train local people and wait for them to come? That's where you have to enforce local content. And we had this discussion before again, some months ago. I think local content is by forcing companies that come to operate in Guyana to contribute to the training of the labor force, and this has to be institutionalized. And you can do this with this professional vocational training programs if you tailor them along the example I presented you from Switzerland, but there are other examples, as I mentioned, from Germany, Netherlands, etc.
So
that's
I take the point. I wanted to raise another point, which is along these lines. Someone noted for us, is there and I've never thought about that, and I wanted to take advantage of your expertise here, Laurent. The extent to which these programs mature. So as you've gone to various jurisdictions, how long does it take for a local population to be, to move into the broad? So along the lines of what Andre is sort of advocating for, what is the global experience like in terms of how, how we see people from the local population transitioning into leadership roles? Is this something that is a 5-year cycle, a 10-year cycle, a 15-year, 25-year cycle? And how do you plan for it in a sense?
Okay, so it's not that easy to answer because there are many parameters. I would like first to come back to what Andre said. A training program, basically it's 2 years to 2 years and a half. I'm talking about the operators. I'm not talking about the construction people. For operators, you have roughly 6 months of Common Core. Common Core is ensuring that the people, they have the basics in math and science and chemistry to follow up the rest of the program. It can be done in any country. It's also startup of workshops, and so it can be done in any country. I'm implementing it at the moment in Tanzania, where in vocational training institutions. So it's not rocket science. You can do it everywhere. The specialization, you cannot do it everywhere because you need some investment and you need to bring some additional instructors. But it's a very limited investment in terms of equipment and competencies compared to the cost of an overall program. So you can do it. So I would say at least the first year, you can do it in country for sure. Then most probably you need for more sophisticated equipment that you cannot acquire like that. The best training center in the world that I know is the one of Petronas called INSTEP in Malaysia. The initial investment is around 200 million of US dollars, and they're expanding every year. So you cannot do it just like that, and it takes time. But it's 4 months. So, okay, you send your people abroad for 4 months, and then you have the on-the-job training. The best way to learn from the people is to learn at the site, their future site of operation, not on another site. So you can do it in country. So basically, as a minimum, 70% of the training can be delivered in country. So it's very realistic. You just have to push. No miracles again. You have to push. Sorry, that was not your question. Coming back to your question, it's difficult to say. Oil and gas industry needs equipment, needs competency. If you're ready to invest, in fact, if you're in a country where after your project there is another project, and there are potential additional prospects, the oil and gas companies will be ready to invest. If I talk about Mozambique, it was a 20 billion investment project. Mozambique, you're ready to build an oil and gas academy for the country because it's for 30 years and there is a huge amount of job to be created. If I take the example of Tanzania, it's just a pipeline. And there are no real other prospects except a big one that is LNG, that is offshore, which is very different. Most probably, if they have the final investment decision, they will create their own academy. When you talk about Uganda, very interesting Uganda, they built an oil and gas academy called UPIC, Ugandan Petroleum Institute in Chikumba, funding by the World Bank. Don't forget that. You don't have only the oil and gas companies. You have this kind of global strategy of implementing something. So this can help also. There is no miracle here again. You're not going to be autonomous after 2, 3, 4, 5 years in terms of training. It's a long term. So, but between being 100% autonomous, and I would like to come back to just what I said before, between being 100% autonomous and being 80 or 90% autonomous, there is not a huge difference for the country. What is important is to start to be autonomous, and you will gain more and more autonomy. But today, realistically, you can already be 60, 70% autonomous in terms of training, and it's good enough to start. And then you will build according to the other developments, according to the actual level of the people. To do that also, as I said before, and it was mentioned also by other panelists, train the trainer program, competency transfer. It has to be written in the marble. If you have an expat coming as an instructor, his duty is to train the trainees, but also to train the local instructors. It has to be embedded in the system.
Well, training the trainers. On that note, we're coming up on 11:57 in Eastern Standard Time, so we're 3 minutes from the end. So, Karen, I'll give you a minute to give us a sum up remark. Andre, I'll give you a minute for a sum up remark, and then David, you'll say thank you. I'll take as your sum up remark the one that we just had, Laurent. And so, Karen, maybe you get to go first, then Andre gets a final remark, and then David gets to say thank you.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to you guys for inviting me. I want to reiterate that, in dealing with this problem, I think we have to start from the very beginning. And I think the pipeline is the beginning because Guyana is so small. And I'm just reiterating some of my comments. If we don't inspire and motivate those young people as they come in and give them the confidence in the very early stages in the primary level, then we'll lose a bunch of them as we are today, and then we'll be playing cleanup there, or they just won't be interested in some of the careers because they'll think that math is too hard, science is too hard. I run into young girls, especially all the time, who say to me that, "Yee, robotics is for boys," or "math is hard," and the fellas say that as well. Math is so difficult, and I think that that it is important that we build the structure, the fundamentals of the structure today that will allow a pipeline into all of these other programs that the panelists are discussing. But you have to start. You have to start with the pipeline. We're too small a country. We have our labor force is too tiny. we can't lose not one of our young people.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
way I look at it.
No, I think you've got, I mean, I think that that's the shift in mindset that perhaps that you're driving. It's the sense that it, in a previous iteration of Guyana, we have thought of these educational opportunities as prize slots to be competed for. And so to think of a Guyana in which you want every single one of the 800,000 Guyanese to be the best educated that they can possibly be, I think requires, and I think that's what you're saying, Ken, it requires a whole, a whole different thought about our, it means that if, that across race, across class, across geographic region, that you're thinking every single kid in the Pomeroon, in Lethem, Port Kaituma, in wherever you find them,
Is
that
an asset.
is an asset. And I think that that's perhaps in a sense, what you've just characterized, I think, is the revolutionary. I don't want to say revolutionary. I don't want anyone to accuse me of being a revolutionary, at least not today.
Be
But I think
careful.
it is I think the mind shift in this entire space about developing workforce capacity that nailing on here today. So Andre, you get your minute, and then finally David gets.
First of all, I would really like to congratulate Karen for her great work, because she's preparing the pipeline that feeds into these educational systems that I have described. Without that work, we won't have the people. And as you said, Guyana had a long brain drain since independence, but there are always young people coming along. We have still a decent birth rate in Guyana, so we have to work with what's coming in the pipeline, and Karen prepares them. Now, I would like to point out two things which maybe went under in my presentation. The Swiss type of apprenticeship program really ties in people with companies, and as Laurent pointed out, you can't act in a void. You have to train people, and by bringing in companies to train these people, and also offering a wage, a salary to these students. So in Switzerland, they get about $1,000 per month, which is, of course, the cost of living is expensive. But this keeps kids off the street. It cuts down youth unemployment. It cuts down crime because they have an income already. And that's, I think, these type of elements have to be introduced to help a lot of other problems in Guyana. So I just want to end it here. Do it as a private-public partnership, not top-down. Involve all stakeholders and develop these training programs where there is the industry. In Lethem, you will have tourism. So you need cooks that have been trained, people that can act as guides. In Georgetown, you have the oil and gas industry, the shore bases. You have all the train the auditors that you need, for example. In Berbice, you have agriculture. Do the training there for that makes sense with the industries available there. So this is my take-home message to everybody who has been listening. I'm happy to talk to government officials if they have any interest. I can also link them up with Swiss officials that will be happy to help. So that's where I would like to stop here. Thank everybody for coming here, particularly also Laurent for his insight from Uganda. Extremely insightful, and I think also very useful in terms of how do you deal with the short-term needs and how you transition to the long-term needs of a developing oil economy in these in these countries that have found oil and gas recently.
So, David, you get the last word from Alison Chu. Thanks to the organizers and panelists. Great conversation. What is the path forward? How do we come together to create the type of workforce capacity Guyana needs? Thank you, Alison Chu.
Well, we've got one vehicle already, which is I will endorse STEM Guyana and Karen's work. I also would like to remind everybody we're now celebrating the 60th anniversary of the University of Guyana, which is involved precisely in moving forward into the next 60 years in a transformative manner and where the leaders at the university are very receptive to these new ideas. We had a program in Washington in September, bringing together UG with Florida International University in Miami, which is a Latin American Caribbean institution, and precisely to look at new areas that UG needs to move into, away from that traditional British Afro-Saxon university that was founded at independence, and make it a much more relevant to the market training center for the future. Karen has mentioned technology. We really haven't gone deep into that, but very important. Technology speeds everything up, and it can become the equalizer for small markets like Guyana to jump stages and not have to go in the sort of arithmetic step-by-step process of other countries, and can go exponentially into the future. I think we need much more of that investment in the technology that can help workforce development. We're over our time. Let me thank everybody for joining us today. Let you know that our last program for the year is upcoming Wednesday, December 13th, 10:30 a.m. And we'll be focusing on the vexing question of the regulatory framework for the oil and gas industry in Guyana, which really bears strongly on the public sector role, but also civil society, the private sector, and how we create that environment in which not only does the oil and gas industry grow and develop, but also the rest of the economy. So we hope you'll join us then, and stay in touch with us at GuyanaBusinessJournal.com and CPCCaribbean.org. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, colleagues. And let me just say at the end here, I notice Peter Ramreka from London sort of chiming in. So I'm going to say we're sorry, Peter, but we will get to this discussion on the case of biomedical training in Guyana in a future episode. So thank you for joining. It's much appreciated.
Thank you all. Be well.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.